She was 8 years old, and she was kneeling in broken glass. The Harley lay on its side in the westbound lane of Route 9, fuel bleeding across the asphalt in a dark rainbow slick, and the man beneath it wasn't moving. Not until Avery Quinn pressed her small hand against his shoulder. Then he grabbed her wrist so fast she almost screamed. One eye open, the whites gone red, a scar running from his jaw to somewhere beneath his collar. "Run, kid," he said. The words came out in gravel and blood. "Men like me bring trouble." She didn't run. She pulled off her denim jacket, the one with the butterfly patch her grandmother had sewn on the left pocket, and pressed it against the wound above his ear. That choice, made in 30 seconds on a dying stretch of California highway, was going to change everything. If you're just finding this story, hit that like button right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. And do yourself a favor, stay until the very end, because what happens between this little girl and these bikers is the kind of thing that doesn't let go of you. This is the weight of chrome and kindness. The sun was going down the way it only does in the Central Valley. Not gently, but like something giving up, bleeding out across the flat horizon in streaks of copper and rust. An 8-year-old Avery Quinn had been walking the shoulder of Route 9 for 22 minutes because the bus driver had left without her again. She knew the number. 22 minutes because she counted. She counted everything. Cracks in the sidewalk, telephone poles, the number of times her mother said, "I'm tired," baby in a single evening. Counting was something to do with her hands when they wanted to shake. The road was empty in both directions, which was normal for this stretch after 5 o'clock. The fruit stands closed at 4. The irrigation workers headed north or south on 99 and left Route 9 to the tumbleweeds and the occasional long-haul trucker who didn't know the shortcut had been a shortcut for 30 years. Avery's sneakers were the wrong size, a half size too small because her feet had grown since August, and she hadn't told her mother yet because her mother had enough to carry. And the left one was rubbing a blister on her heel that she could feel with every step, a dull red pulse against the rhythm of her walking. She heard the motorcycle before she saw it. Not the engine, the absence of it. A sound like a giant exhale, like something enormous holding its breath, followed by a long mechanical scream of rubber on asphalt, and then a crack. Not a bang, not an explosion, just a flat, brutal crack like a bat hitting concrete. And then nothing. Just the wind, just the dry grass rattling in the culvert and the distant sound of a crow. Avery stopped walking. She stood there for a full 3 seconds, which felt like a lot longer, and then she walked toward the bend in the road. The Harley was down in the westbound lane, maybe 30 yards around the curve from where she'd been walking. It had gone down hard on the left side. She could see the long black skid marks starting from the crown of the road and ending at the painted center line, which meant whatever had happened had sent the bike into a slide, and the slide had thrown the rider. The fuel tank was cracked. The dark smell of gasoline was already spreading toward the drainage ditch, and the chrome exhaust pipe ticked in the cooling air with a sound like a clock unwinding. The man was lying at the edge of the lane, maybe 10 feet from the bike, and he wasn't moving. She should have turned around. Every stranger danger lesson, every don't talk to people assembly, every whispered conversation she'd overheard between her mother and her grandmother about men who ride those bikes, all of it said turn around. All of it said walk fast the other way and find a phone. She walked toward him. Up close he was bigger than he had looked from the bend. Not tall, but wide across the shoulders in a way that made him seem like something carved rather than born. And his jacket was black leather with a patch on the back. A skull wearing a crown of thorns made of barbed wire. And beneath it the words Iron Covenant MC in white letters, and beneath that, California. The back of his head was bleeding. Not a little. The blood had already soaked into his gray hair and was running in a dark line down toward his ear and pooling in the grit of the asphalt shoulder. He had been wearing a helmet. The helmet was 20 feet away, split clean down the center seam. Whatever had happened to the left side of his skull had happened after the helmet went. Avery stood over him and her heart was doing the thing it did when she was frightened. Not pounding, but going hollow, like a drum beat with all the resonance taken out. She looked at his hands. They were huge, scarred across the knuckles in the particular way that she had learned in 8 years of watching adults, meant a certain kind of history. His right hand was open on the asphalt, palm up, like he had dropped something important. She pressed her palm against his shoulder the way she had seen the paramedic do when they came for Mr. Hennessy across the hall last winter. His eye opened. 1. The white was red. She didn't know then that burst blood vessels looked like that, and his hand came off the ground so fast that she barely had time to register the movement before his fingers were around her wrist. Not squeezing, just closed, the way you hold something you don't want to lose. "Run, kid." The words came out wet. He was coughing blood with the consonants. "Men like me bring trouble." Avery looked at his hand around her wrist. She looked at the blood running down the side of his head. She thought about her denim jacket, the butterfly patch one her grandmother had found at Goodwill and spent 3 evenings sewing the repair on. And she took it off with her free hand, which was hard with her other wrist still held, and she pressed it folded against the wound above his ear. "You need to hold this," she said. "With your hand. Press hard." He looked at her. Both eyes now, though the right one was half swollen. Whatever he had expected, it was not this. "I'm Avery," she said. "What's your name?" A long silence. The crow called somewhere in the eucalyptus along the ditch. "Grim," he said. It sounded like something he'd been called so long he'd forgotten there might have been another word before it. "Okay, Grim. Hold the jacket." She moved his free hand up to the jacket and pressed his palm flat against it. "I'm going to go to the fruit stand. There's a phone there. I'll be fast." He said something she almost couldn't hear. She leaned down. His breath smelled like motor oil, and something else she didn't have a name for yet. Something chemical and stale that she would learn much later had its own specific vocabulary. "Don't," he said. Don't go for help? Don't." He stopped, coughed, started again. "Don't waste your time on somebody like me." Avery looked at him for a moment with the particular kind of seriousness that some children carry in their faces like a weight they've been holding since before they could talk. "That's a dumb thing to say," she told him, and she held out her pinky finger, the way she did with her best friend Destiny when they made a real promise. "Promise me you won't die while I'm gone." Grim stared at her pinky finger. His own were thick, scarred, purple at the tips from the cold that was coming in now as the sun finished its collapse behind the valley's flat edge. He didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, his smallest finger curved around hers. "Go," he said. She went, running, her blister screaming, the last light going orange over the dry fields and the crow calling and the smell of gasoline following her for the first 100 yards, until the wind shifted and brought the smell of sage instead. Behind her, a man called Grim held a child's denim jacket against his cracked skull and did not die, though later he would say he wasn't sure why he bothered. Later, he would know exactly why. Teresa Quinn had been awake since 4:30 that morning. She was 31 years old and had been awake since 4:30 more mornings than she could count, because the cleaning crew at St. Augustine Medical Center started at 5, and it took 25 minutes to drive there from the apartment on Cesar Chavez, and she needed to eat something first, even if eating something first just meant instant coffee and a piece of toast standing over the sink, because she'd learned the hard way that not eating before a 6-hour shift left her dizzy by 11, and dizzy meant clumsy, and clumsy meant she'd missed a spot, and missed spots meant the supervisor wrote something in the little book he kept in his breast pocket. And what the supervisor wrote in that book was connected in ways Teresa understood too precisely to the question of whether she had a job next month. So, 4:30, every day. She was good at it now the way you get good at carrying a heavy thing. Not gracefully, but without dropping it. She was on her second shift, 3 hours into a 4-hour dinner service at the hotel downtown where she worked weeknights, when her phone buzzed with the number from the fruit stand on Route 9. She almost didn't answer. Then something in the pattern of the buzzing, something she couldn't have articulated, made her step into the supply corridor and pick up. "Mom," Avery's voice. Steady. 8-year-old steady, which Teresa had learned to distinguish from regular steady, because her daughter's calm had its own specific register that meant, "I'm scared, but I'm handling it." There was an accident on Route 9. A man on a motorcycle. His name is Grim. He has a bad head injury, and I told him not to die. The ambulance is already called. Teresa's hand on the phone. The corridor smelling of industrial cleaner and old carpet. "Baby, where are you right now?" At the fruit stand, Mr. Vasquez let me use his phone. Mom, he has a patch that says Iron Covenant. A pause in Teresa that was only a fraction of a second but contained everything she'd ever heard and assumed and been told about men who wore patches on leather jackets. Don't go near him again, she said, and heard herself say it, and heard how it sounded, and then her daughter's voice came back. I already made him promise, Mom. I have to make sure he keeps it. Teresa closed her eyes. She thought about the blisters she'd noticed on her daughter's heel that morning and said nothing about because saying something would have meant new shoes, and new shoes cost money that was already spoken for. She thought about the denim jacket with the butterfly patch. I'm coming, she said. The hospital in Merced was 60 miles north, and Grimm went there by air. The county paramedics had called for the helicopter once they got a look at the head wound. And Teresa arrived at the fruit stand to find her daughter sitting on the hood of a police cruiser with a deputy's jacket over her shoulders. Her feet bare because she'd taken her shoes off to look at the blister, eating an orange that Mr. Vasquez had given her, and answering the deputy's questions in the same 8-year-old steady voice she'd used on the phone. The butterfly patch jacket was gone. Gone with Grimm on the helicopter, packed in a bag as evidence or as belonging, Teresa wasn't sure which. She held Avery longer than she usually let herself. She pressed her face into her daughter's hair and breathed. He would have bled to death, the deputy said, quietly, while Avery was occupied with a second orange. Head wound like that, in this cold, on this road, she made the difference. Teresa looked at her daughter and felt something complicated happen in her chest. Pride. Fear. The particular terror of loving someone small in a world that was not built for smallness. She had bought Avery a Happy Meal on the way home, even though it was not a Happy Meal kind of week financially, and Avery had fallen asleep in the passenger seat before she finished the fries, and Teresa had driven the last 20 miles with one hand on the wheel and one hand resting on her daughter's shoulder, and she had not cried until she was parked in the apartment lot, and Avery was already half awake and wouldn't see it. She didn't know then that the thing her daughter had done on Route 9 was already spreading outward through channels she had no knowledge of. She didn't know that the man in the helicopter had a name that meant something to certain people and that those people had a way of knowing things. She didn't know any of that until the morning. Mats. She heard them at 6:48. She was standing at the kitchen window with her first cup of coffee. Real coffee. The good kind she bought in the small can and rationed carefully. And she heard the engines before she saw anything, because the apartment complex on Cesar Chavez sat in a particular bowl of the valley that caught sound and amplified it. And what she heard at 6:48 was not one engine or two engines, but a sound like a low continuous thunder that didn't stop. She set down her coffee. She walked to the window. The parking lot of the Cesar Chavez apartments held, on a normal morning, approximately 40 vehicles, a mixture of economy sedans, work trucks, and 2 or 3 genuinely aged pickup trucks that served more as storage than transportation. What it held at 6:48 on the morning after Avery had held a bloody jacket against a stranger's head was approximately 87 motorcycles. Teresa counted them later. 87. They came in off Cesar Chavez and filled the lot in a formation that was so organized it took her breath away. Not randomly, not chaotically, but in rows. Each bike angled the same direction, engines cutting off in a sequence that rippled through the pack from front to back like a wave going still. And then there was silence, and the cloud of exhaust fumes drifted in the morning cold, and approximately 87 men sat on 87 motorcycles and did not move. Teresa was already reaching for her phone to call. She didn't know who she was going to call, she just knew she was reaching, when she heard Avery behind her. Mom. Avery's voice coming from the kitchen doorway, where she was standing in her pajamas with her hair sleep-tangled. Are those Grimm's people? Baby, go to your room. Mom. Avery, room. Avery went to her room. Teresa listened to the sound of small feet on old carpet, and then she looked back out the window and the man at the front of the formation. A man so large and still that he seemed less like a person than like a thing that had always been there and merely become visible, was looking up at their window. Not threatening. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't moving at all. He was simply looking, the way a person looks when they have arrived somewhere and are waiting to be acknowledged. Teresa Quinn put down her phone. She put on her coat. She walked downstairs. His name was Marshall Creed, and up close he was somehow simultaneously more and less frightening than he had appeared from the window. More, because he was easily 6'4", and the breadth of his shoulders and the black leather cut suggested a structural capacity that went beyond what was strictly necessary for a human being. Less, because when Teresa came through the lobby door and walked toward him across the parking lot, he took off his sunglasses, and his eyes were brown and tired and carried in them the particular weight of a man who had seen a great many difficult things and was still, on balance, trying to do right. He didn't extend his hand. He just waited. "Ms. Quinn," he said. His voice was low and careful, like a man who had learned to use it precisely because he knew how much of it there was. "My name is Creed. I'm the president of the Iron Covenant Central Valley chapter. Your daughter saved the life of our brother Grimm last night on Route 9. Teresa looked at him. She looked behind him at 87 motorcycles and 87 men in leather cuts, all of them still, all of them facing the same direction like they had agreed on something important before arriving. "She's 8, Teresa said. "Yes, ma'am." "She should have kept walking." "She probably knew that," Creed said. "Doesn't seem to have slowed her down." Something in the way he said it, not with admiration exactly, but with a careful, specific respect, like someone naming a fact that deserved acknowledgement, made Teresa recalibrate slightly. Just slightly. "Why are you here?" she said. "Because our code is old," Creed said, "and it doesn't have many words in it, but the ones it has, it keeps. Your daughter held Grimm together on the side of that road. By the code we live under, she is one of ours now. That means she is protected. Her family is protected. That's not a threat, Ms. Quinn. I need you to understand that. It's a statement of intent. We are here because she is one of ours now, and we take care of our own." Teresa stood in the cold morning with her coat buttoned up and her coffee still upstairs going cold, and looked at this man in the army behind him and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not safety. She was too clear-eyed for that word, and too aware of the gap between stated intent and actual behavior. But something in the direction of safety, something that acknowledged the shape of the concept without fully committing to it. "I have to get my daughter ready for school," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "And I have 2 jobs today." "Yes, ma'am." "And I don't know what to do with—" She gestured at the parking lot. "This." Creed put his sunglasses back on. "You don't have to do anything with it," he said. "We'll be where we are. We won't be in your way." Teresa went back upstairs. Avery was in the kitchen, eating cereal, watching her mother with the careful watchfulness of a child who has learned to read the emotional temperature of a room the way other children read weather. "What did he say?" Avery asked. "He said they're Iron Covenant." "I know that. What did he say?" Teresa sat down across from her daughter. She looked at the cereal. She looked at Avery's face, the gap in her front teeth, the scar on her chin from the playground fall in first grade, the eyes that were her father's eyes, and the expression that was entirely no one's but her own. "He said, you're one of theirs now," Teresa said. Avery considered this with her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Okay," she said finally, and finished the spoon. Teresa stood and went to the window. Below, 87 motorcycles sat in ordered rows, and the men on them had not moved, and the morning cold was settling in over the valley, and a crow was calling somewhere out past the chain-link fence, and everything was exactly as impossible as it had been 30 minutes ago, and somehow that was going to have to be a thing she learned to live with. She picked up her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. Grimm's real name was David Gareth Coulter, a fact that appeared on exactly 2 documents that he still possessed: his discharge papers from the United States Army, where he had served 12 years and 3 tours, and the registration paperwork for the 2019 Harley-Davidson Road King Classic that was currently being loaded onto a flatbed somewhere on Route 9. He had not gone by David in 18 years. He had not gone by Gareth in considerably longer. He had been Grimm since a night in 2006 in a valley whose name he did not say in polite company, When the man beside him had looked at his face during a firefight and said, with a kind of exhausted wonder, "Jesus, Coulter, you look like the Grim Reaper himself," and the name had stuck the way names do when they are more true than the original. He woke in Merced General at 11:14 in the morning with a bandaged head and an IV in his left arm, and the particular gray discomfort of a man who has been unconscious long enough that his body has forgotten its complaints and is now patiently reintroducing them one at a time. The nurse who came was young and professional and did not react to the tattoos or the leather cut that had been hung on the back of the door instead of put in a bag, which meant someone had made a request on his behalf and the request had been honored. He noted this. It told him something about who had arrived and how they had conducted themselves. "You have visitors," the nurse said. "About 40 of them. They're in the parking garage. The hospital asked them to stay in the garage." "They staying?" "They're staying." He looked at the ceiling, white acoustic tile with a water stain in the corner that looked vaguely like a map of a country he'd been to once. He thought about the girl. Small hands, one eye on him, one eye on the road. The practical focus of someone who had already, at 8 years old, learned that panic was a luxury you managed. He thought about the pinky. He had not made a promise like that in a very long time, and the particular weight of it, the smallness and the seriousness of it, sat in his chest next to his heartbeat in a way he wasn't sure what to do with. "I need to make a phone call," he said. "We have your personal phone," the nurse said. "It survived the crash." She brought it. He held it. He looked at the contact list. There weren't many, and scrolled past names he didn't use anymore, past club contacts, past the number for a lawyer in Fresno, until he found the one he'd been scrolling past for 3 years. Elena. He stared at it. He put the phone face down on the hospital tray. Not yet. There was too much. The crash, the girl, the bright particular clarity of almost dying, and the way it reorganized everything in your head into a temporary but revealing order. He needed to be clear before he called that number. He needed to not be whatever he had been on Route 9. He needed to be something worth picking up for. He turned the phone back over. He called Creed instead. Creed answered on the second ring. "You're awake," Creed said. "Tell me about the girl." A pause. "She's 8. Her name's Avery Quinn. She held your jacket on your head for 20 minutes on the side of Route 9 in 40-degree weather until Vasquez called it in. Deputy said she wouldn't leave until the ambulance confirmed you had a pulse." Another pause. "We're at her apartment." Grim closed his eye. The good one. The bad one was swollen shut. "All of us?" "Most of us." Creed. "She saved your life, brother. She's 8 years old. You scared her mother half to death." "Her mother came down and talked to me in her coat with her coffee still upstairs," Creed said. "She's not scared. She's suspicious, which is appropriate. We'll earn it." Grim thought about this. He thought about earning things, about how long it took, about all the things he'd burned down that he was not going to be able to earn back no matter what he did. "Don't crowd them," he said. "We know how to be quiet." "Creed!" He stopped, restarted. The words were thick in his throat, and he wasn't a man who spoke about certain things, but the particular lightness that came after almost dying had not yet fully worn off, and while it lasted, things were possible that wouldn't be possible later. "The kid made me promise. I heard. I wasn't planning to be someone worth promising anything to." A long quiet on the phone. The particular silence of a man who has known you long enough to understand what you are not saying. "You're going to need to re-examine that plan," Creed said finally. Grim put the phone down. He looked at the water-stained map on the ceiling. He thought about a girl in a denim jacket with a butterfly patch, kneeling in broken glass on Route 9 without flinching, and the way she had held out her smallest finger like a contract. He thought about Elena. He thought about the number in his phone he hadn't called in 3 years. He thought about the word earn. Outside in the parking garage, 40 members of the Iron Covenant MC sat on their bikes in the cold concrete dark and waited, because that was what they did for their own, and Grim was their own, and he was alive. And the girl who had made that happen was sleeping tonight in an apartment on Cesar Chavez under the unofficial watch of men who understood, better than most, what it meant to be saved by someone who had no reason to save you. The first week was strange, not threatening strange, not the strange of danger which Teresa Quinn knew precisely, having grown up adjacent to several varieties of it, and learned the specific way danger strange felt in your sternum. This was something else, the strange of something large and unexpected arranging itself with careful deliberateness around your life without actually entering it. Two of them were always in the lot. Not the same two. They rotated, she figured out, probably in shifts, though she never saw the transition because they were always simply there when she looked and never made a production of being there. They didn't loiter. They sat on their bikes or leaned against the fence with coffees from the gas station on the corner, and they were not loud, and they were not in anyone's way. And when Mrs. Delgado from 3B asked one of them to move his bike so she could get her grocery cart through, he moved it without a word and held the gate for her, and she came upstairs and told Teresa that the biker boys were actually quite well behaved, and then seemed surprised that she had said it. Avery thought they were fascinating. Teresa watched her daughter the way she watched everything concerning Avery, with a careful, detailed attention that she never acknowledged as fear, because naming it fear made it too large to carry. Avery asked questions, not in the lot, not of the men themselves at first, but to Teresa in the kitchen, in the specific post-dinner hour when Avery processed the day by talking through it. "Why do they rotate?" Avery asked on the third night. "I don't know, baby. Like, the two in the lot change. I counted. There's never the same two for more than 6 hours." Teresa looked at her daughter. "When did you count?" "I've been watching from my window," said without defensiveness, just clarity. "There are a lot of them. They have different patches. The one with the eagle patch is named Cutter. I asked him when I was getting the mail." Teresa set down her fork. "You talked to them?" "Just Cutter. He's nice. He said he was in the Marines." Avery picked up her fork again. "Can we visit Grim at the hospital?" Teresa looked at the table, at the chipped edge of the plate she'd had since before Avery was born, at the place where the vinyl on the chair across from her had started peeling up from the corner. "He's not our family," she said. Avery looked at her with those eyes. "He has my jacket," she said. Teresa did not have a response for that. They went on Saturday. Avery wore her second favorite jacket, the red one, and braided her own hair because Teresa was working the early shift, and Avery had learned to braid from a YouTube video when she was 7. She packed a small bag with a card she'd made. She had very specifically not drawn anything on it, just written, "You promised," in her careful second-grade cursive, and a tangerine from the bowl on the kitchen counter because she thought he might need fruit. Teresa drove in silence for the first 40 miles. Avery sat in the passenger seat with the bag on her lap and looked at the valley going by. The flat geometry of the orchards, the white sky, the occasional hawk balanced on a fence post like punctuation, and did not ask for music, which meant she was thinking. "You don't have to like him," Avery said finally, about 30 miles out. "I'm going to the hospital with you, aren't I?" "You're doing the face." "What face?" "The face where you've decided something but you don't want to say it because you don't want to be wrong." Teresa was quiet for a mile. The road hummed. A hawk launched off a fence post and caught a thermal and went still in the air above them. "I've known men like him," Teresa said. "Men with those patches and those—" She stopped, restarted. "I've known what they leave behind." "Grim has a daughter," Avery said. "He told me, while I was holding the jacket. He said he chose the club over her, and it was the worst thing he ever did, and he thinks about it every day." Teresa's hands on the wheel, knuckles careful. "When did he tell you that?" "While I was holding the jacket." Avery looked out the window. "People say things when they think they're dying, Mom. They say what's true." Teresa thought about the things she had said in similar moments, the true things, the ones that came out when the filters were gone. She drove the last 30 miles without the face. Grim was sitting up when they arrived. The bandage was smaller. The swelling in his eye had come down to the point where he could open it, though it was still the color of an old bruise, deep purple and green at the edges. He was larger than Avery had registered in the dark on Route 9, his shoulders wider, his hands on the hospital tray table twice the size of her mother's. And he was wearing an Iron Covenant sweatshirt someone had brought him, which made him look like a very large man trying to be comfortable in a room sized for other people. When they came through the door, he looked at Avery first. Something moved in his face. Not softness, exactly. Grimm's face did not do softness, had been organized by experience into a set of configurations that didn't include it, but something that had a similar address, a loosening, a shift in the particular hardness around his eyes. "You came," he said. "You promised," Avery said. She went to the side of the bed and put her bag on the tray table with the practicality of someone completing a transaction. "I brought your card. And a tangerine. You should eat fruit when you're healing. It has vitamin C." Grimm looked at the card. He opened it. He read, "You promised," in careful second-grade cursive. He put it face down on the tray. Not away. Just face down, like something he needed to keep but wasn't ready to look at directly. "Grimm," he said to Teresa, who was standing in the doorway with her arms not quite crossed, a position that preserved her options. "You're her mother. Teresa Quinn." "She told you to run," Teresa said. It was not a question. She didn't. No. He looked at Avery, who was arranging the tangerine and the card in a specific way on the tray table. "She really didn't." A silence. The particular kind that happens when two adults are measuring each other across a room and the child between them is completely unbothered. "Creed's people are in my parking lot," Teresa said. "I know, I told him not to crowd you." "They're not crowding me. They moved Mrs. Delgado's grocery cart." She paused. "What does that mean? What your code says about her being one of yours?" Grimm looked at her. He took a breath that came out rough around the edges, the kind of breath a man takes when he has recently had his chest compressed by a paramedic. "It means she won't be unprotected, as long as any of us are standing. It means if something happens, if you have trouble, if somebody bothers you, if the car breaks down on Route 9 at night, you call Creed's number and someone shows up. It means she's family." "She has family," Teresa said. "Yes, ma'am. More now." Teresa stood in the doorway for another moment. Avery had given up on the tray arrangement and was now asking Grimm if his head hurt and whether he had seen the hawk outside the window and what kind of motorcycle he had. He was answering her in the same flat, careful voice he used for everything, but there was something underneath it that Teresa recognized because she had heard it in her own voice sometimes. The sound of someone trying very carefully not to be too much, trying to take up the right amount of room, trying not to startle something that might still run. She walked in and sat down in the chair by the window. She did not say anything else about the parking lot. 3 weeks later, Grimm was released. He came back to the Cesar Chavez lot in a truck driven by a man named Shepard, massive, quiet, with forearms like tree limbs and a gentleness that seemed specifically calibrated to his size. And Avery was waiting by the fence because Teresa had said she could wait by the fence, but not outside the fence. And when Grimm got out of the truck, she ran the 3 steps she was allowed and then stopped herself. Because even at 8 years old, Avery Quinn understood the difference between what you wanted to do and what the moment called for. Grimm looked at her. He had a new bandage, smaller, and he moved stiffly on the left side where they'd done something to a rib. He reached into the truck cab and came out with the denim jacket. Clean. Someone had washed it. The blood was gone, but it was still hers, the butterfly patch on the left pocket intact, the right pocket slightly frayed at the corner the way it had always been. He held it out. Avery took it. She put it on immediately, even though it was still winter and she already had a jacket on, and it went over the top of everything else and made her look like a child playing dress-up with her own clothes. "You're going to be all right?" she asked. "Working on it," Grimm said. She nodded. "Okay." She put her hands in the pockets. "Creed said you might stay nearby for a while." "For a while?" "You don't have to go fast," Avery said, with the particular gravity she used when she was saying something she'd rehearsed. "My mom took 2 whole years to decide she was going to be okay after my dad left. You can take whatever time you need." Grimm looked at her. Shepard, behind him, found something very important to examine on the door of the truck. "How old are you?" Grimm said. 8 and 3 months, Avery said. "Right." He exhaled. "Okay." It was the most he had said that wasn't factual in longer than he could remember, and somehow it was exactly enough. The cold afternoon settled around them. Somewhere in the lot, one of the Covenant brothers started a bike, and the engine turned over with that low, specific thunder. Not threatening, not criminal, just present and alive. And Avery looked up at the sound and smiled, the gap-toothed smile, and Grim watched her face for a moment and thought about Elena. He thought about the number in his phone. He thought about a girl on a highway at dusk, holding a jacket against a stranger's head like it was the most natural thing in the world, like refusing to abandon someone who had told her to run was simply what a person did. He thought about what it meant to try, what it cost, what it was worth. He pulled out his phone. He stood in the cold of the Cesar Chavez parking lot, with Avery beside him in two jackets and the Iron Covenant surrounding them both at a respectful distance, and he scrolled to the number he hadn't called in 3 years. Elena. His thumb hovered. A door opened on the second floor. Teresa Quinn appeared on the walkway with 2 cups of something hot, and she looked down at the lot, and she looked at Grim, and something passed between them. Not warmth, not yet, but the first acknowledgement that warmth was a direction things could go. He looked back at his phone. His thumb moved, and as the call began to connect, 3,000 miles away, or 200, or whatever distance Elena had put between herself and a father who had chosen everything wrong for too many years, a notification came through first. A text from an unknown number, 3 words and nothing else. She knows about you. Grim went very still. He looked at the phone, he looked at the text. He looked around the parking lot, the familiar faces, the leather cuts, the bikes in their organized rows, and then past the fence at the street, at the ordinary afternoon traffic of Cesar Chavez, at a car parked at the corner that he was almost certain had not been there yesterday. He ended the call to Elena before it connected. He found Creed's number instead. "Brother," he said when Creed picked up, "we've got a problem." Creed's voice came back flat and immediately alert, the voice of a man who had spent enough years in the company of trouble to recognize its specific temperature. "Talk to me." Grim read him the text. 3 words. Unknown number. The car at the corner. A silence on the line that had weight to it, the kind of silence that comes before decisions. "How long has that car been there?" Creed asked. Grim looked again. Blue sedan. California plates. Too far to read. Engine running. He could see the exhaust in the cold air. "I don't know," he said. The car pulled away from the curb, slow, deliberate. Not fleeing, just leaving, the way you leave when you want it known that you were there, and you want it known that you left on your own terms. And then it was gone, and the street was ordinary again, and the cold afternoon went on around them, and Avery was still standing beside him in 2 jackets, with her hands in her pockets, watching his face. "Grim," she said. "What's wrong?" He looked at her. 8 and 3 months. Gap-toothed and serious and completely unafraid in the specific way that was going to get her into trouble someday, or save somebody's life, or both simultaneously. He thought about, she knows about you. He thought about Elena. He thought about 3 years of silence and all the reasons for it, and all the things that lived in those reasons. "Nothing," he said. But his hand, the one holding the phone, was not steady. And Avery, who counted everything and missed nothing, saw exactly where his eyes had gone before the car disappeared around the corner. She turned and looked at the empty street. She said nothing, but her hand found his arm, just briefly, just the pressure of her fingers against leather, and then she let go and turned back toward the building. And the question of who had sent that text, and what they knew, and why they had parked at that particular corner on this particular afternoon, hung in the cold valley air like exhaust smoke long after the blue sedan was gone. The text came from a burner. Creed's guy in Sacramento confirmed it inside 40 minutes. A prepaid flip phone purchased at a gas station in Stockton 11 days ago, paid for in cash, activated once, used once, now dead. No tower ping after the send. Whoever had typed those 3 words had known exactly what they were doing, which told Creed something specific and unpleasant about the category of person they were dealing with. He sat in the back booth of the Copper Rail Diner on South G Street with Grim across from him and Shepard at the counter watching the door. And he spread his hands flat on the table the way he did when he was being deliberate. "Tell me who knows," Creed said. Grim looked at his coffee. He hadn't touched it. It had been sitting there long enough that the steam was gone and the surface had gone dull. Knows what specifically? Don't do that. Grim looked up. Creed's eyes were flat and brown and patient in the way that certain men get patient. Not calm, but containing their temperature because losing it served nothing. There's a list, Grim said. How long? Depends what she knows about. Creed sat back. The booth's vinyl cracked under him. Outside, through the diner window, the Iron Covenant bikes lined the curb in a double row, chrome catching what little light the gray afternoon offered. And the two brothers on door watch stood with their coffees and their backs to the glass and their eyes on the street. Start with the worst, Creed said. Grim was quiet for a long time, long enough that Shepard looked over from the counter, read the silence, and turned back to the door. There was a man named Voss, Grim said. Warren Voss. Fresno chapter, before I transferred. He went federal in 2019, cooperating witness. The whole thing, 14 brothers went down. 3 of them were mine. A pause. He turned the coffee cup a quarter turn without lifting it. I was the one who found out he was talking. Creed, I was the one who brought it to the table. The vote was unanimous, but I was the one who brought it. I know what you brought. What happened after the vote is what I'm talking about. Creed said nothing. Voss had a brother, Grim said. Younger. Not club. Never was. He worked at a tire shop in Clovis. His name was Danny, and he was 26 years old, and he had nothing to do with any of it. He stopped. He started again. Danny Voss found something he wasn't supposed to find, a name, mine, and then Danny Voss disappeared. The diner went on around them. The waitress refilled a man's coffee 3 booths down. The overhead speaker played something country and mid-tempo that nobody was listening to. You think Danny Voss is dead, Creed said. I think whoever made Danny Voss disappear didn't do it because they wanted to protect him. Grim's jaw moved, set. Warren Voss is still in witness protection, but witness protection has edges. People find edges. And if Warren Voss has been working his way back to you, then he has a reason, Grim said. And the reason isn't the club. The club can handle itself. The reason would be something personal. Creed looked at him across the table. Like a man who lost his brother. Grim picked up the coffee finally and drank it cold, the whole cup, like it was medication. Like that, he said. Outside, the wind picked up off the valley floor and pushed a paper cup down the sidewalk, and the bikes shifted slightly on their kickstands, chrome shivering, and Shepard at the counter put his own cup down with a careful sound. There's the girl, Shepard said. Not loudly, just a fact, placed on the table. Grim looked at him. If Voss sent that text, Shepard said, and the text says she knows about you, he's not talking about Creed. He knows about Creed. He's been knowing about Creed. He means the girl, Grim. He knows she exists. He knows what she did on Route 9. The word exists landed wrong in Grim's chest. The way a word can be accurate and unbearable simultaneously. He set the cup down. We need more people on the Quinn building, he said. Already called it, Creed said. 4 on rotation starting tonight. Teresa's going to push back. She can push back at me. That's fine. You need to talk to her, Grim, because she needs to understand this isn't just... He paused, chose the words. She needs to understand that being under our protection right now is not a courtesy. It's a necessity. Grim thought about Teresa Quinn standing in a hospital doorway with her arms not quite crossed. The particular posture of a woman who had survived enough disappointments to stop expecting anything and was quietly, carefully revising that position one careful observation at a time. He thought about the wrong timing of it, of everything. Tonight, he said. Teresa came to the door in her work scrubs. She'd picked up an extra evening shift at the hotel, which Grim knew because Shepard had told him, because Shepard quietly knew everything about everyone in a 3-block radius, the way certain men develop a hypervigilance so comprehensive it becomes its own kind of knowledge. And she looked at Grim standing in the hallway with his jacket on and the November cold still on him, and she did not say come in, but she did not close the door. Avery's asleep, she said. I need 10 minutes. She looked at him. She opened the door wider. The apartment smelled like whatever Avery had eaten for dinner, something with garlic and maybe canned tomatoes. And it was smaller than he'd expected, though he wasn't sure why he'd expected anything. The furniture was old but kept. A plant on the windowsill that was doing its best, Avery's school books in a stack on the coffee table with a library card sticking out of the top one. Teresa stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms not quite crossed. "Talk," she said. He talked. He didn't tell her everything. There were things that were not his to give her, things that would put her in a position she didn't need to be in. But he told her the shape of it. A man with a reason. A text that meant they'd been located. The shift in what protection meant in practical terms. She listened without interrupting. This was one of the things about Teresa Quinn. She listened completely, the way some people read, consuming the whole thing before responding, and you couldn't tell while she was doing it whether she was going to agree with you or take you completely apart. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. She looked at the plant on the windowsill. "How long?" she said. "I don't know. Approximate. Until we find him. Until we understand what he wants." He stopped. "Or until he makes a move and we deal with it then." "Deal with it," she repeated. Not with sarcasm, just the specific weight of a phrase. "I know what that sounds like." "I've got a daughter," Teresa said, "and a mother who needs help I can barely afford to give her. I'm working 2 jobs and I'm 3 weeks from being okay on the November rent, and I can't have this in my life. Do you understand? I cannot." "I know." "Then why?" She stopped. She pressed 2 fingers to her forehead and held them there for a moment, the gesture of someone managing their own temperature. She went back to that highway in her head for weeks. I'd hear her at night, not crying, just talking to herself, practicing something. And I knew she was going back to Route 9 and trying to figure out if she'd done the right thing. Did she figure it out? "What do you think?" He said nothing. "She figured out she'd do it again," Teresa said. "She figured out she'd do it every time because that's who she is, and she doesn't know yet that being that kind of person costs something." She looked at him directly. "You need to make sure that what it costs her isn't more than she can pay." Grimm held her gaze. It was a harder thing to do than he'd have expected, looking at this woman straight on. She had the quality of a clear surface. Not transparent, but clean, without the usual distortions that people put between themselves and the world. "I need to know something," he said. "Then ask it." "Is she safe here? The building, the layout? I need to know if there's a second exit she can use that isn't the front lot." Teresa's expression shifted. Something settling. The shift of a woman who has just understood that she is being taken practically seriously and is recalibrating what that means. "Come on," she said. She showed him the building, the service door in the back stairwell, the gap in the chain link on the east side that came out on a residential street. The neighbor in 2C, a woman named Rosario Mendez, 64 years old, former school principal, who Teresa trusted absolutely and who had a key and had been Avery's emergency contact since they'd moved in. Grimm memorized it, all of it, the way he'd memorized the layout of every space he'd operated in for 12 years. Though the skills acquired doing one thing and the skills required for another thing were not as different as people like to believe. Before he left, he stood in the doorway and looked at the stack of Avery's school books on the coffee table. The library card. "She's going to be fine," he said. He wasn't sure why he said it. Teresa looked at the books too. "She's going to be more than fine," she said. "That's the part I'm trying to protect." He nodded. He left. In the hallway, before he got to the stairwell door, he stopped. He took out his phone. He found Elena. He stared at it. He put it away. Not because he couldn't, because he needed this one thing, Elena, to stay clean, separate from the Warren Voss problem, uncontaminated by whatever was coming. He needed his daughter to exist in a different category than the blue sedan and the burner text and the 3 words that meant "I see you." He pushed through the stairwell door and went down into the cold. Creed called a full table 3 days later at the Covenant's Merced chapter house, a converted auto shop off R Street with new roll-up doors and old everything else, the kind of place that smelled permanently of motor oil and coffee and had a furnace that worked 3/4 of the time. 42 men around a table that had been built by a brother named Harker, who was dead now, dead in the way that some members of the Iron Covenant were dead, which was a way that didn't get discussed outside the table. Grimm sat at Creed's right. This was not a standard seating arrangement. It communicated something, and everyone at the table understood what it communicated. The business was laid out plain: the text, the burner phone, Warren Voss in the 2019 federal case, and the 14 brothers, and Danny Voss, and the tire shop in Clovis, and the disappearance that was not a disappearance in the way that news disappearances were disappearances. A man with a reason. A blue sedan. When Creed was done, a man named Breckenridge, road captain, 19 years in, a face like a topographic map, leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. "So Voss is alive," Breckenridge said. "Protective custody, and he's alive and apparently mobile enough to put someone outside our prospect's parking lot." "Apparently," Creed said, "and the asset of this whole thing is an 8-year-old girl." "Avery Quinn is not an asset." Creed's voice stayed flat. "She is family. That's why we're having this conversation." Breckenridge looked at him. "I'm not saying she isn't. I'm saying Voss thinks she is. To him, she's the thing he can use. He doesn't get to use her. Then we need to be clear about what we're willing to do to make sure he doesn't." The table was quiet. In the furnace against the back wall, something clicked and the heat shifted and came back on, and the ductwork ticked with the expansion. A man named Dutch, younger, 3 years patched, the one who was on rotation at the Cesar Chavez lot tonight, spoke from the far end of the table. "What does he actually want? Voss? If he's been watching, if he sent the text, what's the play? Because threatening a kid isn't a plan. It's leverage. For what?" The room looked at Grimm. Grimm had been looking at the table's surface, the grain of the wood Harker had built. He looked up. "He wants me to know he can reach anyone I care about," Grimm said. "And then he wants to give me a choice. Come forward. Give him something he can use in whatever he's building toward, or watch him use the people around me as pressure." "What does he think you can give him?" "Names, old ones, things from before the federal case that weren't part of the cooperation agreement." Grimm's jaw moved. "He gave up 14 brothers to protect himself, but he couldn't give up what he didn't know. There were things I kept off the record specifically because I didn't trust the table back then, and after 2019 I had reason to." A pause. "Voss has always believed I was holding something back. He's probably right." The silence was different after that, a silence with a different shape. Creed said, "Are you holding something back right now?" Grimm looked at him. "From the table?" "From me." A long moment. The furnace clicked again. "There's a name," Grimm said. "One name. A man who is currently operating inside a federal task force and has been, as far as I can tell, since 2018. He was the one who told me Voss was talking. He was the one who gave me the information that led to the vote." He stopped. "He's also the reason that certain things from before 2019 never made it into the federal record. He buried them. Because if they came out, they'd take him down too." The room was very still. "His name is inside the federal structure," Grimm said. "That's the thing Voss thinks I'm sitting on. That's the thing Voss wants, because with it, he can renegotiate his protection agreement. He can flip the whole table over." Creed looked at him for a long, flat moment. "And is that name," Creed said, "something you can verify?" "I've had it verified, twice, independently." "And you've been sitting on it since when?" "Since the 14 brothers went down." Grimm looked at the table surface again. "I've been sitting on it because putting it out there has consequences I haven't been ready to live with, including for people who are not in this room." Breckenridge said carefully, "You've been sitting on the name that could have reduced 14 sentences and you didn't use it. I've been sitting on the name that could have started a war inside the federal system and gotten people killed who didn't have anything to do with any of this." Grimm's voice stayed even. "I've been sitting on it the same way you sit on a grenade with a pulled pin, very carefully, and not moving." The table processed this. It took a moment. Dutch said from the far end, "The girl, Avery. Voss found out about her how? Hospital records, probably. My name, her name, the statement she gave the deputy on Route 9. It's not classified. It was in the local paper." Grimm looked at Dutch. A 3-paragraph piece in the Merced Sun-Star. Local girl helps injured motorcyclist on Route 9. Her name was in it. Her name was in it, Dutch repeated. Her mother didn't know we were... He stopped. Reformulated. Nobody thought to ask the paper not to run it. Nobody thought there was a reason to. Creed stood up. This was unusual. Creed conducted table meetings from a position of stillness, which was part of his authority, the particular kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself through movement. When he stood, it meant something was closing. Here's what we do, Creed said. Grimm is going to write down the name. It goes in the vault, on paper, with 2 witnesses, and it does not leave the vault until we need it. We are not using it as a weapon. We are using it as an insurance policy. If Voss moves, against Grimm, against the Quinns, against anyone under this roof, we pull it out and we burn his protection agreement to the ground through legitimate channels. He looked around the table. We are not going to war over this. We are going to be very, very patient and very, very smart and make it completely clear to Warren Voss that threatening a child under our protection is the stupidest play he has ever considered. How do we make it clear? Breckenridge asked. We find him, Creed said. We don't touch him. We just find him. We let him know he's been found. We let him understand what being found by us means. Not violence, just visibility. The man has been invisible for 3 years. The one thing that scares someone who's been invisible is being seen. The table was quiet. And the girl? Dutch said. The girl goes to school, Creed said. She eats her cereal, she does her homework, she doesn't know any of this, and she doesn't find out. That's not negotiable. It took 2 weeks to find Warren Voss. The finding was done by men who were good at finding things, men with specific backgrounds and specific skill sets and a specific brand of patience that looked, from the outside, indistinguishable from stillness. Voss was in Modesto. Not in a safe house. He'd left the program's structure at some point in the past year, whether voluntarily or because the program had decided he was no longer worth the cost of protecting. He was in a rented house on the east side with a security system and a neighbor who didn't ask questions and a blue sedan in the driveway. Not the blue sedan from Cesar Chavez. A different blue sedan, but the same plate configuration, which told them it was the same person driving or the same person's person. Creed went to Modesto with 4 men and no motorcycles. They drove in 2 trucks and they sat outside the rented house for 2 hours in the cold, and they did nothing except exist in a visible way. One of the men walked slowly past the front of the house twice. The security camera above the garage would have captured his face clearly. His face was a face that Warren Voss, if he had been building a file on the Iron Covenant, would recognize. They didn't knock. They didn't leave anything. They drove back to Merced in the dark. The next morning, a text came to Creed's personal number. Not a burner this time. Voss's actual number, the one that had been in their files since 2019. I hear you. Creed showed it to Grimm. Grimm read it. He handed the phone back. That's acknowledgement, Creed said. It's not standing down. No, Grimm said. It's not. He's going to want to meet. I know. Are you going to? Grimm thought about it. Outside the chapter house, a bike turned over somewhere. Not one of theirs, just a random morning sound from the street, and the exhaust was deep and cold and echoed off the industrial buildings across our street. He's got nothing if I come to the table, Grimm said. If I sit across from him, he knows the name stays buried. That's what he's actually afraid of. He's using the girl because he thinks she'll make me nervous enough to give him something before I have time to think. But if I can get in a room with him without doing anything stupid, you're not meeting him alone. I know. You're not meeting him at all until I say, Grimm looked at him. Creed. You almost bled to death on Route 9 6 weeks ago, Creed said. Your judgment has been fine. Your impulse control has been adequate. But you are not going alone into a room with a man who has already demonstrated he knows where a specific child sleeps. He said it without heat, just the architecture of the thing. You wait. Grimm sat with it. How long? He said. Until we know more about who's running him. Because Voss doesn't do this alone. He's not smart enough and he's not connected enough. Somebody is pointing him. Creed took the phone back. And whoever's pointing him is the actual problem. This was the thing Grimm had been not quite thinking for 2 weeks. The thought that existed in his peripheral vision every time he considered the text and the blue sedan and the timing of it all, the specific timing, the week after he'd gotten out of the hospital, the week after the local paper ran 3 paragraphs about a girl on Route 9. The thought that this was not Warren Voss acting out of grief and anger and 3 years of accumulated resentment. The thought that someone had given Warren Voss a target and a reason and a blue sedan. He said it out loud for the first time. Voss is bait. Creed looked at him. He's bait, Grimm said. Somebody pointed him at us. Let him run his little reconnaissance. Let him send a text. Let him exist visibly in Modesto, because what they actually want is for us to move, Creed said. For us to move, and when we move, they see how we move, and they see who we are, and they see the shape of what we're protecting. He stopped. And when they see the shape of what we're protecting, they know exactly where to apply pressure. The room had gone very quiet. Just the two of them now. Shepard had stepped out 20 minutes ago at Creed's nod, which was another thing Creed did, the way he organized space so that the most important conversations happened in the smallest number of ears. Who would do that? Creed said. Who has enough knowledge of the 2019 case and enough reach to put Voss in motion and enough reason to want you specifically? The name in the vault, Grimm said. The federal contact. If he's heard that I have it. If someone told him. He looked at the roll-up door across the room. Then this was never about Voss at all. This is about making me do something that forces that name into the open. Either I use it to protect the girl, which exposes it, or I don't use it. And something happens to the girl that I have to respond to, which creates a paper trail that exposes it a different way. He turned back to Creed. Either direction, the name comes out. And when it comes out, a federal agent gets to claim I weaponized a protected intelligence asset against him, and the whole thing gets buried again, this time permanently. Creed was very still. So the name in the vault, he said slowly, is not insurance. Not anymore, Grimm said. Right now it's a liability. Right now it's the thing they're counting on me having. A long silence. Then we can't use it, Creed said. No. And we can't not use it. No. Creed put his hands flat on the table again, his default gesture of deliberateness. He pressed his palms down like he was holding something still. Tell me the name, he said. The days that followed had a particular quality, a surface calm that everyone involved understood to be the specific calm of a held breath. The rotation on the Cesar Chavez lot continued. Avery went to school and came home and did her homework and asked questions about Grimm and ate her cereal and did not know that the careful arrangement of men and motorcycles around her life had shifted from protection into something more like a perimeter. Grimm came to the lot every other day. This was not arranged. He simply appeared in the mornings usually with 2 coffees from the corner gas station and sat on the front step of the building's entrance until Teresa's work truck came around the corner from the early shift, and they drank the coffees in the cold. And they did not talk about Voss or names in vaults or federal agents. They talked about Avery, about the things she'd said at school, about the book she was reading. Something with dragons, Teresa said, very serious about the dragon politics. About the plant on the windowsill that was finally looking better since Avery had started talking to it. She talks to the plant? Grimm said. Every morning. She read that it helps. Teresa wrapped both hands around her coffee. She believes things with her whole body. It's terrifying. Grimm thought about pinky promises. Yeah, he said. One morning, Avery came downstairs before Teresa had left and found them on the step. She looked at Grimm, then at her mother, then at the 2 coffees with the particular calculation of a child doing social arithmetic. You're friends now, she said. Not a question, a confirmation. We're working on it, Teresa said. Avery sat down between them on the step. She put her backpack on her lap. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the lot and the 2 brothers on rotation who were, as usual, being extremely unobtrusive by 2 very large motorcycles. Grimm, she said. Yeah. Why haven't you called Elena? The question came out simple and specific the way Avery's questions always did, with no flinching and no apology for the size of them. Teresa looked at the lot, giving him the question space. Grimm looked at his coffee. It's complicated, he said. My teacher says complicated is what people say when they know what to do, but they're afraid to do it. Teresa, still looking at the lot, said nothing, though something in her shoulders shifted in a way that might have been the suppression of something. Your teacher's not wrong, Grim said. So call her. Avery, you promised you'd survive, she said. That was the promise. But surviving isn't just the body part. Surviving is the whole thing. She looked up at him with those eyes. The patient, ancient 8-years-old eyes. That's what my mom did when my dad left. She kept the body part going for a while, but then she had to do the whole thing part. It took longer, but she did it. Teresa, still looking at the lot, said, Avery, I'm just saying what's true. I know you are. That's why I'm saying your name like that. Avery considered this. She put her chin on her backpack. Call her, she said to Grim, for the last time on the subject, with the finality of someone who has said the thing, and now the saying of it is the other person's to deal with. Grim nodded. He called Elena that evening. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail, 4 sentences, not enough and more than he'd managed in 3 years. He put the phone face down on the chapter house table and stared at the ceiling and felt the particular quality of that specific silence. The silence of having done the thing, which was so different from the silence of not having done it that it almost had a different sound. His phone buzzed 30 minutes later. He picked it up. A text. Not Elena. Not Creed. Not a number he recognized. She's not yours to protect. She never was. You have 48 hours to deliver what you're holding, or we find a different way to have the conversation. Below the text, a photograph. He looked at the photograph for a long time without moving, without breathing, almost. The chapter house was empty around him, just the furnace ticking and the cold pressing in at the seams of the roll-up doors, and the photograph on the screen of his phone was taken at what appeared to be this morning from across the street, in the direction of the front step of the Cesar Chavez apartments. It showed 3 people on a step, 2 coffees, a child with a backpack. The quality of the photograph was excellent, clear and close and deliberate, the way photographs are when they are meant to demonstrate capability rather than simply document a moment. It had been taken with a long lens. It had been taken from a position that the 2 brothers on lot rotation should have been able to see. Should have. Grim was on his feet before the thought finished forming. He called Creed. Creed picked up on the first ring because it was Creed, and Grim said, The step. This morning. Who had the angle? A half-second pause. The kind that Creed's half-seconds never contained, but this one did. I'm checking. Check faster. The sound of Creed moving. A door. A voice that was not Creed saying something Grim couldn't hear. Then Creed back on the line. Dutch and Harmon had the lot, Creed said, but the step is inside their sweep. If someone had a long lens from the Delgado building across the street, the angle, they've been inside our perimeter, Creed. Someone who knows our positions well enough to find the gap. Grim stopped. He looked at the photograph again, at the clear, deliberate, excellent quality of it. This isn't Voss. No. Voss couldn't do this. No. The silence on the line was the silence of 2 men arriving at the same place simultaneously. It's him, Grim said. The name in the vault. He's not running Voss as bait. He's running this himself. Which means he's not inside a federal building somewhere watching from a distance, Creed said. He's here. He's in Merced. He's been here long enough to map our positions. Grim's hand on the phone was steady. This was the thing about certain men with certain histories. When the threat became fully real and fully visible, the shaking that had been present in ambiguity went away, replaced by the specific stillness that was the body's response to something it recognized. Move the girl, Grim said. Already calling it. Tonight. Now. I know, Grim. And Creed. The voicemail I left Elena tonight. If someone is running surveillance on my... I'm on it, Creed said, and he was already moving. Grim could hear the boots on concrete and the bike coming alive in the background, and the chapter house around Grim was cold and still, and the photograph was on his phone screen and the 48-hour clock was already running. He looked at the photograph one more time. 3 people on a step. 2 coffees. A child with a backpack who talked to plants and believed things with her whole body, and had no idea that the careful world her mother had built around her was currently being taken apart From the outside, with a level of precision that meant someone with a great deal of resources had decided she was the easiest. The word that Grimm had been reaching for when the response limit cut the sentence was leverage. Avery Quinn was the easiest leverage. He stood in the empty chapter house with that knowledge sitting in his chest like a stone dropped into still water, and he did not move for 30 seconds, which was long enough for the ripples to reach the edges of everything. Then he moved. Teresa's number rang 4 times before she picked up. 4 rings was too long. 4 rings meant she was in the middle of something. He could hear background noise, the specific acoustic of a hotel service corridor, voices at a distance, the mechanical sigh of a service elevator. Grimm. Her voice had the quality it got when she was reading a situation through its tone rather than its content. What's wrong? Where's Avery right now? A half second. School? She's at school, she gets out at 3:15 and Rosario picks her up on Tuesdays because I call Rosario. Tell her to stay at the school. Don't let Avery leave the building. Tell the front office there's a family situation. He was already moving, jacket on, keys in hand. The chapter house door opened behind him. The cold came in like a wall. I'm sending 2 people to the school right now. They'll be in a truck, not on bikes, so it's not Grimm. Her voice had dropped to something flat and quiet that was more frightening than alarm would have been. Tell me what happened. There's a photograph. From this morning, the step. The silence on her end lasted exactly 1 breath. How close, she said. Close enough. He got on the bike. I need you to leave work right now. I'm sending Shepard to pick you up. Don't use your car. I'm not leaving without knowing Avery is safe. She will be safe in 15 minutes. I need you to trust me for 15 minutes. Another silence. Longer. He could hear her breathing and the service corridor and the far-off sound of a cart being wheeled on linoleum, and he understood what he was asking. He understood precisely what he was asking a woman who had survived by trusting almost no one to do in 15 minutes. And he held the phone and waited. 15 minutes? Teresa said. Yes. Grimm. One more pause. If anything happens to her, it won't. He rode. The school was a K-8 public building on the south side of town, beige stucco and chain link, the kind of building that had been built in the 70s to last 30 years and was now in its 53rd year of lasting. Grimm pulled up in the truck he'd borrowed from Dutch. His bike was too visible, too recognizable, too much. And he sat across the street with the engine running and watched the front of the building until he saw the 2 brothers Creed had dispatched, a truck he recognized parking half a block down on the school side. And he counted the exits. Front entrance, side gate. Loading dock at the back that connected to the lunch area. He called the school's main number. The woman who answered was efficient and professional, and when he told her there was a potential family safety situation involving a student named Avery Quinn in 3rd grade, she transferred him to the principal in under 90 seconds, which told him the school had protocols and used them, which was the first genuinely good thing about the last 40 minutes. The principal's name was Flores. She listened. She asked 2 questions. She told him Avery was currently in class, that the classroom had no exterior windows on the ground floor, that the side gate was already locked as a matter of policy after 8:15 a.m., and that she was walking to the classroom herself right now to personally verify. Don't alarm her, Grimm said. I know how to talk to children, Principal Flores said, with the specific patience of a woman who had been managing other people's emergencies for 20 years. She came back on the line 4 minutes later. She's in class. She's fine. She's reading. A brief pause. She's reading, and she's also apparently helping the boy next to her with his fractions, which is not technically what they're supposed to be doing, but something in Grimm's chest unknotted by approximately 1 degree. Her pickup is authorized for a woman named Rosario Mendez, Principal Flores said. Do you want me to require additional verification? Yes, and call this number when she's with Mendez and in the vehicle. And you are? Grimm thought about how to answer that. He thought about the roster of titles available to him and which ones applied here and in what order. Family, he said. A pause. All right, Principal Flores said. Basi. He found Creed at this chapter house. Creed was at the table with Breckenridge and a man named Reyes who was new enough that Grimm still sometimes forgot his first name. Marcus, he thought, though Reyes went exclusively by Reyes in the way that certain men arrived in the club already decided about what they would answer to. The three of them had the look of men who had been talking fast and had just stopped when Grimm came through the door. "Tell me," Grimm said. Creed told him. They'd backtracked the photography angle. The Delgado building across from the Cesar Chavez apartments was a 5-story Section 8 residential block with exterior fire escapes on the east face, and from the third-floor fire escape landing, angled south, you had a clear sight line to the front step of the Quinn building, a gap in the lot rotation that lasted approximately 6 minutes every 2 hours when Dutch and Harmon aligned to watch the street approach rather than the structure. 6 minutes. Someone had mapped that gap and used it and sent a photograph within 2 hours of taking it. "That's surveillance work," Breckenridge said. "Not Voss, not anyone Voss has access to." "We established that," Grimm said. He sat down. "What else?" "The truck," Reyes said. Quiet voice. The kind that made you lean toward it. "Blue sedan. We found the plate. Registered to a shell company in Bakersfield. 2 layers of LLC between the plate and anything real. The kind of structure that costs money and takes time to set up." "So it's been set up for a while," Grimm said. "At least 8 months," Reyes said. "Maybe longer." Grimm looked at Creed. "That's before Route 9, Grimm said. "This was set up before the crash, before any of this with the girl, before I was even—" He stopped. "This wasn't reactive. This was already in motion." Creed nodded slowly. "Which means whoever is running this didn't start because of you almost dying on Route 9. They were already building something. You showing up in a hospital in Merced with your name attached to a news story about a little girl just gave them a better angle." Grimm's hand on the table. The scarred knuckles. The particular stillness of a man whose mind is working very fast behind a face that is barely moving. "Then the original target isn't Avery," he said. "No. The original target is the vault. Has always been. So whoever pointed Voss at us—" He stopped again. Restarted. "Creed, when I gave you the name, when I told you who's in the federal structure, where did that conversation happen?" The room went very still. Creed's jaw moved, once. The particular movement of a man computing something he does not want to arrive at. "Here," Creed said. "At this table." "Who was present?" Creed looked at Breckenridge. Breckenridge looked at Reyes. Reyes looked at the table. "6 of us," Creed said. "You, me, Shepard, Breckenridge, Dutch, and Harmon." Grimm thought about Dutch and Harmon on the lot rotation this morning. The gap in the sweep, 6 minutes. He thought about the text arriving 30 minutes after he'd told Creed the name. He looked at Creed and he did not say it because he did not need to say it, because Creed had already arrived at the same address by the same route, and was sitting with it in the particular way that men sit with things that require them to rearrange their understanding of their world. "It was in this room," Grimm said. Very quietly. "Yes," Creed said. "Which means 1 of 6 people." "Yes." "And 2 of those 6 people were on the lot rotation this morning, the one with the gap." Creed's hands went flat on the table, pressing down, holding still. "Breckenridge, he said. Breckenridge had been in the club 19 years. He looked at Creed, and then he looked at the wall above Creed's head, and his face did something complex and painful that was not guilt and not innocence, but somewhere in the territory of a man bracing for the weight of an implication he has not invited but can see arriving. "It wasn't me," Breckenridge said. "No," Creed said. "I know." He looked at Reyes. Reyes was already shaking his head, not defensively, but with the specific still certainty of someone who has nothing to defend because the accusation makes no contact with anything real. "I've been with you for 3 years, Reyes said. You know where I've been for 3 years. "I know where you've been," Creed said, which left 4. Shepard, Dutch, Harmon, and Grimm. And the room they were in contained none of them, except the man who had told Creed the name in the first place. Grimm looked at the table. "Don't," he said. "I'm not," Creed said. "I can hear you considering it. I'm being thorough. I told you the name. If I were the leak, telling you the name would be the last thing I'd do, because it gives you the single piece of leverage that ends this. I know that, Grim. Then stop considering it and find the other three. Creed stood. Reyes, get Dutch and Harmon here, separately, now. He looked at Breckenridge. You're with me. They moved. The room emptied except for Grim, and he sat in the empty chapter house with the furnace ticking and the cold pressing in and the photograph on his phone and the understanding that somewhere in the structure of the thing he'd trusted, the table, the code, the room built by Harker, who was dead, there was a break. A place where the integrity of the thing had given way, and water had been coming through it for some time, and everyone had been standing in the water without knowing. His phone buzzed. Principal floors. Avery was with Rosario Mendez and in the vehicle, and they were 15 minutes from the chapter house where Creed had arranged a room. He breathed for the first time in what felt like an hour. Then his phone buzzed again. A different number. An area code he didn't recognize. He answered, Coulter. The voice was male, mid-range. Careful the way voices get when they've been trained to be careful. Not affect, but discipline. The kind that came from years of deciding exactly how much to give away in a syllable. We should talk before this goes somewhere neither of us wants. Grim's hand around the phone. Steady. Who is this? He said. You know who this is. He did. The voice was different from the voice he remembered. Thinner, stripped of something it had carried years ago, but the underlying structure was there. The cadence, the precision of the pauses. Kellner, he said, a half second on the line, just a half. That's good, the voice said. That's quick. I wasn't sure you'd have it. Special Agent Raymond Kellner, 12 years with the Federal Task Force on Organized Crime, Western Region. The man who had told Grim in a parking garage in Fresno in 2018 that Warren Voss was cooperating. The man who had buried the things that couldn't come out. The man whose name was written on a piece of paper in a vault in the back room of an auto shop on R Street in Merced. The man who had, apparently, been in the valley long enough to map a surveillance gap in an Iron Covenant lot rotation. You've been busy, Grim said. So have you. A pause. The girl. Avery Quinn. She's quite something. Her statement to the deputy? I read it. 11 pages, 8 years old. A beat. You should have kept her out of this. She was never in this. You put her in this. I put your name in a newspaper. You brought the club to her building. You made the connection visible. The voice remained careful. No heat in it. Just the architecture of an argument. I didn't create the liability, Coulter. You did. The moment you decided a child was worth organizing 90 motorcycles around. What do you want, Kellner? The same thing I've always wanted. The documentation. Whatever you've been holding since 2018, the paper trail, the recording if there is one, anything with my name in it that you've been keeping somewhere cold. A pause. You give me that? I call off Voss. I walk away from Merced, and Avery Quinn goes back to being a girl who reads dragon books and helps her classmates with fractions. The silence from Grim was complete. Not the silence of hesitation. The silence of a man hearing something from every angle simultaneously. You've been inside the school's network, Grim said. I have resources. She was helping a boy with fractions. That's not in any report. You've been inside. I have resources, Kellner said again, with the particular patience of someone who does not need to explain how much they can see. The documentation, Coulter. 48 hours becomes 24, starting now. The line went dead. Grim sat with the dead phone for 3 full seconds. Then he called Creed. Descent. The briefing took 20 minutes. Creed listened without moving, which was the thing Creed did that was most unsettling to people who didn't know him. The absolute stillness, the way he absorbed information without any of the micro-movements that people used to signal they were processing it. When Grim was done, Creed put both hands flat on the table. He was inside the school's network, Creed said. Yes. Which means he's been running this from close, not coordinating remotely. He's been in Merced for however long it took to do all of this, Grim said. The LLC structure for the car, the surveillance mapping, the school network, weeks, at least. And now he has 24 hours on the clock. Creed looked at the table. He chose 24 because he knows we can't get the documentation to anyone useful in 24 hours. Any legitimate channel we go through, any attempt to surface what we have, takes longer than 24 hours. He's thought about this. He's thought about everything, Grimm said. He's been thinking about it since 2018, since the moment he told me about Voss and then immediately realized that telling me meant I had something on him. He stopped. He thought I'd use it right away. When I didn't, he had to figure out why. And when he figured out why, he had to wait until you had something to lose, Creed said. The word lose landed in the room with a specific weight. Until I had someone, Grimm said. The door opened and Shepard came in. He looked at Creed, he looked at Grimm, he read the room the way Shepard read rooms, completely and without asking. Dutch and Harmon are here, he said, separately, in the side rooms. Good, Creed said. He stood. He looked at Grimm. I need to talk to them. I know. You stay here. Creed, if it's one of them, you cannot be the one in the room, said plainly, without apology. You will do something that cannot be undone, and right now we cannot afford anything that cannot be undone. You stay here. Grimm looked at him, at the 19 years of knowing in Creed's face, at the particular authority of a man who has been the person in the room for a very long time and understands exactly what that requires. He stayed. It was Harmon. Grimm knew it before Creed came back because Creed was gone for 40 minutes, and the only sound from the side rooms was, at one point, a single raised voice that might have been Dutch and might have been Harmon, but had the specific pitch of someone being confronted, and then nothing, and then Creed's boots on concrete coming back through the main space. He came in and sat down and said nothing for a moment. Harmon, Grimm said. Creed looked at him. How long have you known? I didn't. The way he moved when you said the name in the table meeting, a specific stillness, the kind that's learned. Grimm's hand on the table. How long? He says 8 months. That Kellner approached him 8 months ago. Creed's voice had gone very flat. The flatness of controlled grief, which in Creed expressed itself as a reduction of everything, tone, expression, movement, to the minimum necessary. He says Kellner had something on him, something from before the club that Harmon had believed was... He stopped. It doesn't matter what he believed. He's been feeding Kellner information about the rotation, about the vault, about what we were doing. He told Kellner the name. 30 minutes after you told me. Creed looked at the wall. He texted it from the bathroom, while we were still at the table. Grimm thought about the chapter house's bathroom. The single-stall bathroom with the door that didn't lock properly because Shepard had been meaning to fix it for 6 months, 30 feet from where they'd been sitting. Where is he now? Grimm said. In the side room, with Breckenridge. And Dutch. Dutch is... Creed paused. Dutch is not happy. Dutch had been in the club for 11 years. He and Harmon had come in the same year, had prospected together, had been friends in the specific way that men become friends when they go through something difficult at the same time. The particular kind of betrayal that Harmon had committed was not only against the club, it was against Dutch, who had stood next to him on the rotation this morning with no idea that the gap in the sweep had not been an accident. We need to deal with Harmon later, Grimm said. Right now. I know what we need to do right now. 24 hours, Creed. Kellner has resources inside a school network. He has a federal background. He has Voss. And now he knows we know about Harmon, which means he's going to accelerate. I know. If he accelerates, the girl... Grimm. Creed's voice. Not loud. Just complete. The voice that closed things. I know. Grimm stopped. He breathed. The furnace clicked. The cold pressed in at the seams. What do we have? Grimm said, quieter. We have the documentation in the vault, which we can't surface in 24 hours through legitimate channels. Correct. Creed looked at him. So we need an illegitimate channel that arrives at a legitimate destination. Grimm thought about this. He thought about the federal structure and the people he knew who existed at its edges, not inside it, not cleanly outside it, but in the specific territory of people who moved between jurisdictions with enough speed that the jurisdictions sometimes couldn't quite identify them. He thought about a woman named Carver. federal prosecutor, Eastern District, who had spent 6 years trying to build a case against a network of corrupt law enforcement officers in the Central Valley and had been blocked at every turn by people she couldn't name but suspected. A woman who, if she received documentation with Kellner's name in it from an anonymous source, would know exactly what to do with it and would not ask where it came from until she was already 2 steps into the process. He thought about whether he trusted that, whether the math worked, whether getting the documentation to Carver in 24 hours was possible without a trail that Kellner could intercept. "I know someone," Grimm said. "Tell me." He told him. Creed listened without moving. When Grimm was done, Creed was quiet for a moment. "You trust her?" Creed said. "I trust what she wants. She wants Kellner's network more than she wants anything else. She'll take the documentation and run. And when she runs, Kellner's leverage disappears. His leverage depends on the documentation staying buried. The moment it's in Carver's hands, him asking for it is pointless." And Voss. Voss is a protected witness who's been running unauthorized surveillance on a minor in violation of his protection agreement. The moment Carver starts pulling threads, Voss becomes a liability to the people protecting him. Creed looked at the table for a long time. "The delivery," he said. "How?" "I go in person. You're the last person who can go in person. You're the reason she'd be listening in the first place. You walk in there with documentation naming a federal agent and your own name on the 2019 case, and she has an obligation to—" "Not if she never sees me," Grimm said. "If the documentation arrives without me attached to it. If the source is a club attorney with a sealed delivery protocol. If there's enough distance between my hands and what she receives that it's legally untraceable back to this room. That takes a lawyer. I know a lawyer. In Fresno. He owes me 3 years of interest on a favor." Creed looked at him with the measured, long patience of a man who has been in the company of hard decisions long enough to recognize when one is actually the right call, despite everything about it. "Make the call," Creed said. "Tonight." The call took 4 minutes. The lawyer's name was Dern, and he said almost nothing except the things that mattered, which was how Grimm knew he was the right person. He said he could have a courier in Merced by morning and the documentation in transit to the Eastern District by noon and a sealed source protocol in place by the time anyone thought to ask. Grimm hung up and looked at his phone and then looked at the door. Shepard was in the doorway. He had come in quietly enough that Grimm hadn't heard him, which was a thing Shepard did that should not have been possible given his dimensions. "The girl's here," Shepard said. "Rosario Mendez brought her. Teresa's already here." Shepard paused. "She's not happy about the chain of custody on the information," as she put it. "She wants to know everything." "She's going to find out everything?" "She's already finding out. She's in the back room with Creed, and she's asking questions the way her daughter asked questions, which is to say completely and without stopping." Grimm almost smiled. The almost smile was the closest his face got to it under ordinary circumstances. And these were not ordinary circumstances, but it was there. He got up. He went to the back room. Teresa was standing in the center of it, leather jacket on because someone had given her a jacket against the cold, and she'd put it on without looking at it, which meant she was beyond the point of thinking about what she was wearing. And she was looking at Creed, and she had the same quality she'd had in the hospital doorway. The clear surface, the clean glass, no distortions. "You knew this was bigger than a text," she said. Not to Creed, to Grimm, as he came through the door. "I knew it was possible it was bigger," he said. "That's not a different thing." "Teresa, my daughter is in the next room with a woman she loves, eating a sandwich, and she doesn't know that there is a federal agent who has been inside her school's computer network and who knows that she helps boys with fractions." Her voice was flat and clean and precise. "She doesn't know that. She thinks this is an adventure." Teresa looked at him. "When does she find out it isn't?" Grimm looked back at her. He didn't look away. "She doesn't," he said. "That's the point. And if you can't make sure of that, then I'll tell you before it becomes something she needs to know, and we'll make the decision together about how to tell her." Teresa stood very still. She looked at him the way she'd looked at the hospital doorway the first time, the measuring look, the look of someone who has been lied to in the specific way that comes with promises and is checking whether this has that particular shape. "Together," she said. Yes. Another silence, the kind that held a lot. All right, she said. What do you need from me? What they needed from Teresa was 24 hours of normal, 24 hours of Avery believing that the club being gathered at the chapter house was a normal club thing and not an emergency with a countdown, and Teresa being the one who could make that happen, because Teresa was the best person in any room at projecting a version of normal that had enough of the real thing in it to be convincing. She went back to the front room. Grim heard Avery's voice, that particular eighth-year voice, halfway between childhood and something older, asking Shepard whether his tattoo was a dragon or a lizard, and Shepard's low rumble saying it was a matter of perspective, and Avery's very serious reply that perspective was important, and she would need to see it in better light to decide definitively. Grim leaned against the wall of the back room and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about Kellner's voice, the careful precision of it, the discipline. He thought about Kellner in 2018 in a parking garage in Fresno, leaning against Grim's bike with his jacket collar up against the November cold, and his face doing the thing that people did when they were telling you a truth that cost them something. Voss is cooperating, Kellner had said. I'm telling you because it's the right thing to do and because I need you to know I'm the one telling you, which means I'm the one you owe. He had thought then that he understood the transaction. That Kellner was a man in a difficult position, doing a calculated good thing and asking for proportional credit. He had thought the owing was simple. He had not understood then that the owing was the mechanism. That Kellner had handed him information like a key and then watched him use it and documented the using and had been holding the documentation of that using for 6 years as the actual currency of the transaction. He had thought Kellner was flawed but functioning, a man navigating a morally complex institution with as much integrity as the institution allowed. He had been wrong about all of it. The particular wrongness of that, not just the danger of it, but the foundational wrongness of having misread a person so completely, sat in his chest with its own specific gravity. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. Elena. Not a call. A text, responding to the voicemail he'd left 4 hours ago that felt like 4 years. I got your message. I don't know what to say. Can I call tomorrow? He stared at the text. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. If the documentation reached Carver, if Dern's courier was fast enough, if Kellner didn't accelerate the clock, if Dutch was where he was supposed to be, and the rotation held and Avery Quinn made it to tomorrow, not knowing that the world had been doing complicated, dangerous things around her. He typed back, yes, call whenever. He put the phone in his pocket. He went back to the same room because there was work to do, and the work required him to be present in the room rather than inside the problem, and he had been inside the problem long enough that his presence there was no longer useful. Creed was at the table with Reyes and Breckenridge, talking quietly over a map of Merced that Reyes had printed. An actual paper map, because Creed had a specific and well-founded distrust of digital mapping in situations where their network security had recently demonstrated itself to be compromised. They were marking positions. 3 men pointing at a paper map in a converted auto shop at 9:30 at night, their breath visible in the cold that the furnace wasn't quite defeating, the sound of Avery and Shepard in the next room over the background. Couriers confirmed for 6 a.m., Creed said without looking up. Good. Dern called back. He's asking for verification on one section of the documentation. He needs you to... Creed stopped, looked up, looked past Grim at the door. Grim turned. Harmon was in the doorway of the side room. Breckenridge had been watching him. But Harmon had done the thing that men with military backgrounds knew how to do, had been absolutely still and absolutely patient until the moment when absolute stillness stopped registering as a threat and became just furniture. And now he was in the doorway, and his face had the specific quality of a man who has made a decision and is already through the other side of it. He was holding a phone, not his own, a satellite phone, the kind that didn't use cell towers. He called me, Harmon said. His voice was stripped of everything except what was necessary for the sentence. Kellner, 10 minutes ago. He knows the documentation is going out in the morning. He looked at Grim, not at Creed, at Grim. He moved the clock. He's not waiting 24 hours. The room went completely still. He says he has someone at the school, Harmon said. Not in the network, physically at the school. Rosario Mendez brought Avery here, which means he knows Avery is not at the school. He's been tracking Rosario's vehicle. A pause, the flat, specific pause of a man saying the last thing. He knows she's here. Creed was already on his feet, but before he moved, before anyone moved, the distinctive sound of a Harley coming down our street filtered through the walls of the chapter house, and then another, and then not 2 bikes, but what sounded like 20 coming from the north and slowing, and the specific pattern of that sound was wrong because it was the wrong hour and the wrong direction for any of their people. Grim looked at Creed. Creed looked at the door. Reyes already had his phone out, already calling the brothers on street watch, and the voice that came back was fast and tight and said 3 words before the line went loud with engine noise and cut out. They're not ours. In the next room, Avery Quinn stopped talking about the dragon tattoo. The silence from that room was the silence of a child who has learned, 8 years into a life of reading situations through walls, that when adults go very quiet without warning, it means the thing that adults go very quiet about without warning is never nothing. Avery Quinn had learned this at 4 years old, then again at 6, then again at 8 in the specific and comprehensive way that 8-year-olds learn the things that matter, completely, without the option of unknowing them. She sat in the back room of the chapter house with Rosario's hand on her shoulder, and she listened to the silence from the main room, and she counted. She got to 7 before Grim came through the door. He came in fast and low, and he looked at her with a specific focus that she understood, even then was not alarm. Was the opposite of alarm. Was the controlled and deliberate attention of a man deciding exactly what to do in the next 30 seconds and doing it. Rosario, he said, back exit, the service door behind the workbench. There's a truck outside with the engine running. You get in, and you don't stop for anything. Rosario Mendez had been a school principal for 22 years. She stood up with Avery's hand in hers without asking a single question. Avery. Grim crouched to her level. His eyes were steady and dark and told her the truth of the situation without the details of it. You go with Rosario. You don't look back. You understand? Avery looked at him. She looked at the door to the main room where the sounds were happening. The boots on concrete, the voices too low to hear words, the particular dense energy of men reorganizing themselves around a threat. You'll be okay? She said. His jaw moved. Working on it. She held out her pinky. He took it, the same way he had on Route 9, his enormous scarred finger curved around her smallest one, careful the way large things are careful with small ones. Go, he said. She went. The main room was a controlled storm. Creed had the table map in his hand and was directing positions with the flat economy of a man who has run operations in worse conditions. 4 brothers to the front roll-up, 3 to the north wall windows, Reyes out the side to count what was on the street and come back with a number and nothing else. Shepard was already at the roll-up door with his hand on the release, not pulling it, just ready, his body between the door and the room, the way Shepard's body positioned itself between doors and rooms as a matter of cellular instinct. Harmon was still in the side room doorway. Nobody had told him to move. He hadn't moved. Grim came back into the main room and looked at Creed. They're clear, Grim said. The truck, Rosario, and Avery, already off our street. Creed nodded once. Reyes came back through the side door. His face was the face of a man who has seen something and is arranging it into useful information before he opens his mouth. 22 bikes, Reyes said, staged down the block, not running, riders still mounted, and a black SUV behind them. Commercial plates, tinted, running. The SUV, Kellner's presence. His particular signature, not on a motorcycle, not in the leather, but behind glass and tinted windows like a man who uses other people's exposure. He's not coming in, Grim said. No, Creed said. He's waiting for us to come out. He wants the documentation first. The bikes are pressure. He thinks we'll negotiate rather than... The roll-up door came up. Not from inside. From outside. Someone with a key code or someone who had taken the code from Harmon, and the roll-up came up in its loud mechanical rattle, and the cold November air blew in off R Street like a hand across the face, and the man who stood at the threshold was not a biker. He was in his early 50s, medium height, jacket that was too clean for the street and too casual for an office. The particular in-between clothes of a man who operates in between things. His face was the face from a memory 6 years old, thinner now, the way Kellner's voice had been thinner on the phone, stripped of something that had been there before. Confidence, Grimm thought. The stripping of confidence, or its replacement with something colder. Kellner stood in the open roll-up door with the November street behind him and the 22 motorcycles staged at the end of the block and the black SUV idling. He looked at Grimm. "I'd like the documentation," Kellner said, "and then I'll leave. And none of this becomes something worse than it already is." Grimm looked at him across the room. 30 feet of concrete and cold air, and 6 years of wrong assumption. "You're inside a federal investigation's chain of evidence right now," Grimm said. "You understand that." "I'm a federal agent making a request of a known associate of an outlaw motorcycle club," Kellner said. "The documentation of that is whatever I write in my report. Dern's courier left 40 minutes ago." The first crack. Small. A tightening around Kellner's eyes that lasted less than a second and told Grimm everything about the accuracy of that guess. Kellner had not known about the courier. He had thought the clock was still running. "Whatever Dern has," Kellner said, "is inadmissible without chain of—" "Carver doesn't need admissibility yet," Grimm said. "She just needs the name. She's been trying to attach a name to the network for 6 years. You've been the reason she couldn't." He took a step forward, just one, steady, his boots on concrete sounding out in the cold silence. "She has the name now." Kellner's face, the controlled surface of it, the discipline that had been built over years cracking at its foundation, not from the outside, but from the inside, from the specific weight of a plan that had just collapsed in a way he had not designed for. "You don't know what you've done," Kellner said. "I know exactly what I've done. There are people in that network who will not respond to a federal investigation the way Voss responded. There are people who will—" "Come after me," Grimm said. "Yeah, I've thought about that." Another step, 20 feet now. "I've thought about what it means to pull this particular thread. I've thought about every person who might be on the other end of it." His voice stayed flat, even, the voice of a man who has done his accounting and accepted the total. "And I decided the girl was worth more than the quiet." Something moved in Kellner's face. Not softness, not regret exactly. Something in the category of recognition. The look of a man seeing very clearly the mechanism he failed to account for. The variable he could not have modeled because it was not the kind of variable that appeared in case files or risk assessments. An 8-year-old in a denim jacket with a butterfly patch. "The bike's on the street," Creed said from behind Grimm, his voice low and carrying the particular weight of a man who has been patient for the entire duration of a situation and is now finished being patient. "Tell them to go home." Kellner looked at Creed. "Those aren't my people." The room shifted, the temperature of it, the specific temperature that changes when a piece of information arrives that reorganizes everything around it. "Say that again," Grimm said. "The 22 bikes," Kellner said, and his voice had lost the careful discipline now, had gone to something raw, something that was almost what sounded like genuine. "Are not mine. I have 4 men in the SUV, and that is the full extent of what I brought to this street tonight." Grimm looked at Creed. Creed looked at Reyes. 22 bikes, Reyes said slowly. "Staged. Waiting. Not Kellner's." "Not Kellner's. Then whose?" The answer came not as a thought, but as a sound. The particular sound of 22 motorcycle engines turning over simultaneously, the deep collective thunder of them, rolling down R Street, not toward the chapter house, but past it, the sound moving like a wave, and then the engines cutting out one by one in the sequence Grimm had heard before. The sequence that rippled through a formation like a wave going still. He walked to the open roll-up door. He stood beside Kellner. He looked down R Street. 90 motorcycles. They came from the north and the south simultaneously, filling R Street end to end, the chrome catching the streetlights, the leather cuts catching nothing, absorbing everything. And the men on them were completely still, engines off, facing the chapter house and the black SUV in front of it, and the man in the too clean jacket standing in the roll-up threshold. Creed's network. Not just Merced. Every chapter within 4 hours of our street that had received a call sometime in the last 2 hours from a number that rang once and meant come now and come ready. 90 motorcycles. And Kellner's 4 men in the SUV, and Kellner himself, and the 22 bikes that were not Kellner's but were also not moving anymore because they were now surrounded by 90 Iron Covenant brothers, and the math of that situation was not complicated. Kellner stood very still. "I want a lawyer," he said. Quiet. The voice of a man watching a structure collapse in slow motion and identifying the only solid thing remaining. "You're a federal agent," Grimm said. "I'm aware of what I am." "Then you know that what's on Dern's Courier right now constitutes a credible whistleblower complaint under federal statute, which means Carver is not optional. And you know that what you've done tonight, the school network, the surveillance of a minor, the unauthorized contact with a protected witness, constitutes a pattern that no lawyer is going to make disappear." He looked at Kellner, at the thin, stripped face of a man whose plan had held for 6 years and had come apart in one night because of a variable called a girl on a highway at dusk who didn't run when she was told to. "It's over, Kellner." Kellner looked down our street, at 90 motorcycles and the men on them sitting with that particular stillness that was not the stillness of waiting, but the stillness of having already decided. His hand went to his jacket pocket. Slow, deliberate. The move of a man who has one thing left and is deciding whether it is the thing. Shepard's hand was on Kellner's wrist before the pocket was reached. Not violent, just closed. The same way Grimm's hand had closed on Avery's wrist on Route 9. Not squeezing, just present. Just an unmistakable communication about what would and would not be happening next. Kellner looked at Shepard's hand on his wrist. He looked at the size of the hand. He looked at Shepard's face, which was expressing something that was technically patience, but contained within it the complete willingness to become something else. Kellner's hand came out of his pocket empty. He sat down on the concrete floor of the chapter house, not because anyone told him to, because the particular weight of what had just ended was not something that could be held upright. Grimm looked at Creed. Creed looked at the 90 motorcycles on our street. He took out his phone. He dialed a number. He said 4 words into it before the other end picked up, and the line opened and a woman's voice came back, professional and alert. The voice of someone who has been waiting for a specific call for a very long time. "Carver," Creed said, "it's in your hands." And from somewhere down our street, past the line of motorcycles and the idling SUV, and the man sitting on the chapter house floor, Grimm's phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number that resolved, when he looked, into the 3 words that closed the last. The 3 words were, "It went through." Dern's Courier, Carver's office. The chain of custody intact and the documentation inside the Eastern District sealed evidence protocol before Kellner had driven down our street with his 4 men and his too clean jacket and his 6 years of careful architecture that had come apart in a single November night. Grimm read the text. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked at Kellner sitting on the chapter house floor and felt nothing dramatic. No satisfaction, no relief, nothing cinematic. Just the specific exhaustion of a thing that has been held for a very long time finally being set down. The way your arms feel after. The particular emptiness of the weight being gone. Carver's people arrived 40 minutes later. 2 vehicles, unmarked, professional. They took Kellner and his 4 men without theater. The 22 bikes on our street. Men Kellner had hired through 3 layers of intermediary. Men who understood now that the intermediary was sitting in federal custody and their fee was not forthcoming. Left quietly, in 1s and 2s, the engines fading north and south until our street was just our street again. Just the cold and the streetlights and 90 Iron Covenant motorcycles parked in a silence that felt, after everything, almost like a sound of its own. Harmon went with Carver's people voluntarily. He stood at the chapter house door and looked at Creed for a long moment, and Creed looked back and neither of them said anything, because some things have already been said in full by the time the words would be needed. And what remained between them was the specific grief of 19 years meeting 8 months of fear and finding no resolution that didn't cost something permanent. Harmon nodded. Creed nodded back. Harmon walked out. Dutch watched him go from across the room. Dutch's face was a thing Grimm did not look at directly, because some pain is private even in a room full of brothers, and Dutch was going to need time that nobody could give him faster. Voss was picked up the next morning at the rented house in Modesto. His protection agreement was already under review by noon. By evening, 2 federal prosecutors who had been building towards something for 6 years had a name and a file and the particular energized focus of people who have just received the thing they needed. Whatever happened to Warren Voss after that was inside a system that Grimm had, for the first time in a long time, allowed to handle something without keeping a contingency in his back pocket. He slept that night for the first time in 3 weeks without the specific alertness that lived behind sleep when threat was present. He slept in a room at the chapter house, with the furnace finally working and the cold held at the walls. And when he woke, the morning was gray and ordinary, and the most beautiful thing he'd seen in months. He called Elena at 8:15. She answered on the second ring. They talked for 40 minutes, which was 40 minutes longer than he had talked to her in 3 years combined. He did not explain everything. He explained what mattered, that he was sober, that he had been sober, that he understood what he had traded away and had stopped pretending the trade had been necessary. He said the thing he had been not saying for 3 years, which was that he had chosen wrong, and he knew it, and he was not asking her to forgive it, only asking if there was something still left to build on the other side of it. Elena was 23. She had her mother's eyes and his stubbornness and a life she had built entirely without him. That was, from what he could hear in 40 minutes, a good life, a real one, with a roommate she liked and a job she was good at and a city that suited her. She had not been waiting. She had been living. She said, "I don't know what this is yet." He said, "That's okay." She said, "I'm not going to pretend it isn't. I'm not going to say it's fine." He said, "I know." A silence. The particular silence of 2 people on either side of a long damage, standing in it, not pretending it wasn't there. "There's a girl," he said. 8 years old. She made me make a promise on the side of Route 9, and she has been extremely consistent about holding me to it. Elena was quiet for a moment. "What kind of promise?" "To survive," he said. "The whole thing version of it, not just the body part." Another silence. Then, carefully, the sound of something shifting in her voice. Not forgiveness, nothing so sudden or so clean, but the first movement toward the territory where forgiveness eventually lived. "She sounds annoying," Elena said. "She is," he said. "She's also the reason I called." The diner was on the east side of town, the kind of place that had been there long enough to stop trying to be anything other than what it was. Avery chose it because it had good pancakes and a window booth, and because she had been told she could choose, which she took seriously. They came in out of the January cold, Teresa and Avery and Grimm and Creed, and Shepard at the counter because Shepard went where Grimm went and had stopped apologizing for it. And the waitress brought coffee without asking because the diner was the kind of place that read a table accurately, and the coffee was hot, and the window showed the gray morning street where, at the curb, 3 Iron Covenant bikes sat in the cold with their engines off. Avery wrapped both hands around her hot chocolate. She looked at Grimm across the table. "Elena called you back," she said. He looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Your face is different." She said it simply, factually, the way she said everything. "The tense part is gone." Teresa, beside her, looked at the window and said nothing, and allowed herself the small private expression that she wore when Avery said something true that Teresa had also noticed and had been choosing not to name. Grimm looked at Avery for a moment. At the gap-toothed smile she wasn't quite suppressing. At the butterfly-patched jacket on the back of her chair. "She called," he said. Avery nodded, satisfied, and applied herself to the hot chocolate. Creed drank his coffee and looked out the window at the 3 bikes at the curb and the January street, empty at this hour, the morning just beginning to put gray light on the storefronts and the bare trees along the sidewalk. He looked like a man at rest, which was different from a man at peace. Rest was earned, peace was given, and Creed had never waited for things to be given. "What happens now?" Teresa said. "Not to anyone in particular. To the table. To the morning." "You go to work," Creed said. "Avery goes to school. We go back to being what we are." He looked at her. "The rotation comes off." You won't see us in the lot anymore." Teresa looked at him. Something passed across her face, and something she identified and then did not say, because Teresa Quinn had learned the difference between what you felt and what needed to be spoken. "All right," she said. "We're not gone," Creed said. "We're just not in your parking lot." "I know what you mean." Avery looked up. She looked at Creed, then at Grim, then at her mother, then back at her hot chocolate. She was quiet for long enough that all three adults looked at her, which was not something that happened often and meant something when it did. "I didn't know it was going to be all of this," she said finally. "When I stopped on Route 9, I just thought he was a person, and he was hurt, and he told me to run." She looked at Grim. "But you looked like somebody who'd been told to run for a really long time already, and it didn't seem like it was working." The diner went on around them. The waitress refilled someone's coffee 2 tables down. The morning light moved on the window. Shepard at the counter was very still. Grim looked at the child across the table, who had knelt in broken glass on Route 9 and held a jacket against a stranger's head because he was a person and he was hurt. And he felt the specific weight of being seen clearly by someone who had not needed anything from what they saw. The particular rarity of that. "It wasn't," he said. She nodded. She picked up her hot chocolate. She looked out the window at the 3 bikes at the curb, chrome catching the first thin morning light off the street. "I'm glad you didn't," she said. The diner was warm. The coffee was hot. Outside, the valley morning came on slowly, the way valley mornings did. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the gradual accumulation of gray into gold, the flat light spreading across the rooftops, and the bare trees and the chrome of 3 motorcycles parked at a curb. Grim looked at the window, at the bikes and the light, and the ordinary, extraordinary fact of a morning arrived at. He thought about Route 9, the cooling asphalt and the crack of chrome on pavement and a crow calling somewhere in the eucalyptus. A pinky extended in the failing light by someone who hadn't needed a reason beyond the one she'd already given. He was a person, and he was hurt. He thought about all the miles between that moment and this one, the cost of them. The specific and irreducible cost that no one in this booth was pretending hadn't been paid. He picked up his coffee. He held it. He did not say anything else, because there was nothing left that needed saying, and the particular grace of that, of sitting in a warm diner on a January morning with people who knew what it had cost and were still at the table, was not something you improved by naming it. Outside, the engines stayed quiet. The morning kept coming, and in a booth by the window of a diner on the east side of town, 4 people and the man at the counter sat with their coffees and their hot chocolates and the simple, hard-won fact of still being here, and let the world go on around them the way the world does when it has finally, after everything, decided to let you be still. End.